Joining us. We will start. So good morning again, good afternoon, good evening, bonjour, bon après-midi to all our attendees around the world. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. My name is Clémence Naré. I'm the lead of this project and senior law advisor for the ASGM Secretariat. And I will be your moderator for this today webinar. I'm really thrilled, as we can see actually in the chat, that we have a huge turnout. We had over 300 registrants, and currently we're heading to 120 plus participants. So thank you for making time to join us today. This really truly underscores the importance of the topic that we'll be discussing today. The governance of the artisanal and small-scale mining tailings is a subject that has garnered increased focus since the Minamata Convention in 2013. However, despite this recognition, the topic hasn't received the attention it deserves from the international community, from government, and for actors in the mining sector. So yet, given the use of mercury and other hazardous products, the production and management of ASGM tailings carry significant global implications, impacting the health, social, and environmental aspect of millions around the world. Moreover, actually, tailings processing present untapped opportunities for communities. So over the past year and a half, we really dedicated ourselves to consultations with members, with experts in the sector, and thorough research to understand the governance of ASGM tailings and reprocessing. It hasn't been without challenges, but with the collective expertise and contributions, we're really excited today to present to you the result of our research. So our heart-left thanks, actually, on behalf of the Secretariat to all of the authors and contributors to this project. We also thank the reviewers, those that are named in the report and those that decided to remain anonymous. We really thank them for their contribution that helped improve the quality of the reports. So, but we wouldn't be here without the support of the United States Department. So I'm thrilled to be welcoming Jane Dennison from the Office of Environment Quality from the US State Department, who will be sharing some opening remarks. And for this report, we have collaborated closely with many ASGM Secretariat experts and international renowned experts that are here with us today. So presenting the results and findings of this report on behalf of all of us, author Nelly Montgomery from Mont Consult and Giorgio Di Tomi from the University of Sao Paulo, and also colleagues Grégoire Bellois, co-lead for this project and senior policy advisor, and my colleague Viola Torres, who is tax advisor. So many thanks for joining us. But we are also privileged to have Alfonso Rodriguez, Global Technical Director from Pure Earth, who is here to share a first-hand experience of tailing management in Colombia. But lastly, but not least, we're really happy that ASGM Director Greg Radford has found time from his busy schedule to be here today to welcome us. So I would like to invite Greg, followed by Jane, to share some few remarks before we start. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Clémence, and it's a real pleasure to be here and joining everybody and welcoming you to this webinar. As Clémence mentioned, our report that we're launching on ASGM tailings management reprocessing governance was a long time coming, with a huge amount of research and a large team from the Secretariat and consultants. So I'd just like to personally thank everyone that worked on this report. It's a rare global study because there isn't a lot of work that's been done on tailings governance specific to the ASGM sector. And as Clémence mentioned, we're very fortunate to have the support of the US State Department supporting our work. The US is a member of the IGF, and is also a member on our executive committee. So I'd like to thank the U.S. for their support to the IGF, as well as to our 3-year program with them, which is focused on developing policies to reduce mercury pollution in the ASGM sector. So we know roughly 40 plus million people work in ASM. The numbers are very hard to nail down, but we know there's a very significant number of people who work in ASM for their livelihoods. And roughly 50% of those are focused on ASGM. And this accounts for roughly 20% of the world's gold supply. But this also comes with really significant environmental impacts. And ASGM is also a major source of mercury emissions. And as Clemence mentioned, the Minamata Convention has played a very significant role globally in trying to reduce mercury emissions, as well as mercury management in the ASGM sector. But tailings management in ASGM really hasn't received as much attention. And poor tailings management practices occur everywhere, every country that has ASGM, every region globally. This includes, inadequate tailings ponds, very poor restoration or reclamation if it happens at all. There's many instances of tailings reprocessing using cyanide that's applied to tailings containing mercury, which we know is an absolute worst case practice that happens very commonly. And so in our report, we tried to, provide a baseline of the current ASGM tailings governance, what's currently happening. We also talked about, identifying the challenges that governing this sector happens, as well as identifying kind of some key questions. For example, is an ASM-specific tailings management standard needed? We know in large-scale mining, the global industry standard on tailings management was developed a couple of years ago and plays an important role in managing tailings at the large-scale mine. But at small-scale mining and artisanal mining, we don't have anything along those lines. And so our report is really thorough. It is kind of a current state of play that really, as Clemence mentioned, a huge amount of research went into it, and we did uncover a number of challenges, which we'll be talking about today. So I'd like to just welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. Stay tuned for the work we'll be in this space through our support and contributions from U.S. State Department, and we'll be continuing this work over the next couple of years. So this report launch is kind of our first, is the first you'll hear from us, but it won't be the last. We'll be very active, and we're very keen on many of you that are attending today to support us and work with us on this important topic. So I think I'll stop there and hand it over to Jane. And Jane, welcome.
Thanks, Greg, and thank you everyone for participating in this launch event. The idea for this report really came out of a State Department project with Pure Earth to work on mercury recovery from ASGM Tailings in Colombia, and of course, from a concern over the release of mercury from these tailings and the mobilization of mercury caused by reprocessing with cyanide. We are very pleased that IGF was able to take on this next step for this work, looking especially at the tailings situation in other countries besides Colombia, and also looking at the legal frameworks for addressing tailings management. This is a very important issue for many countries, and we hope that this report will be useful for those countries in their efforts to protect human health and the environment from mercury pollution, which is, of course, the mission of the Minamata Convention on Mercury. Thanks so much for being here. It's a thrill to see so many people with the interest, including some of the experts that we've worked with over the last decade, really. And with that, I'll turn it back to Clémence.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thanks, Greg. This is really an important topic, as Jen and Greg mentioned. We're really excited to be sharing the results of our research, and we are going to start by introducing you briefly to the project. I'm sure that some of you haven't heard about the project yet, so we're going to take 1 minute to introduce you to the project. So if you go to the next slide, you will see, as Jen mentioned, we are really happy to have and grateful to have received the funding of the U.S. State Department to work on this project that is called Developing Policy to Reduce Mercury Pollution from the ASGM Sector. And Greg mentioned that this is just the beginning of our the implementation of our project with the launch of this report. We will be working, if you look at the next slide, in the coming years on many different activities and regions. So the project started with this first phase with the research and the report today. And we will be conducting, actually starting now, capacity building, including regional trainings in Asia, in Africa, and Latin America, that will be open to all IGF member countries and OOS and the State Department priority countries. So stay tuned for that, it's coming. We also are happy, actually, to have funding to support 3 more countries for deep dive support that will be defined in collaboration with the countries. So we will be sharing more information about it. In next year and leading to the year after, we will be sharing additional case studies based on what our activities in deep dive countries and additional reports and research. So, and we will also be developing a final guidance for governments. So if you are not satisfied with some of the scope and topics in this report, be assured that this is not the end of our research. We will be undertaking additional research. Feel free to share your experience, comments with us so that we can take this into account in the next iteration of our research project. And Greg mentioned, as well as Jen, so the overall objective of the project is really to support IGF member countries and resource-rich countries in general to design and implement appropriate regulation for sound management and responsible exploitation of ASGM tailings. So we will talk about ASGM management, but also reprocessing. And the aspect of reprocessing is also a topic that is really underexplored, and we're happy to share a few case studies with you, and we're happy to have Alfonso who will be sharing more information and experience from Colombia. So I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Grégoire Bellois, who is also a co-lead for this project, to tell you more about the inception of the report, what the methodology did we use before delving to the... Yes, so if we move to the next slide, again. Maybe here, before I... Yes, Grégoire, go ahead. Sorry for... Yeah, Grégoire, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Clémence. It's really a pleasure to be here with you for the launch of this report. As Clémence said, Jane mentioned, Greg, also it's been 1 year and a half that we're working on this project, so we are really happy to have it to be here today with you. So maybe next slide. So we are here to formally launch this report. So let's have a look at what you'll find in this report. So the first part is really about a technical consideration detailing how ASGM operates, how tailings are generated, and why and how mercury is used, and how to properly handle it. Then the report dives into existing ASGM tailings governance framework at global, regional, and national level. We then look at policy consideration covering formalization, sound management of tailings, taxation and fiscal considerations, and the relationship between artisanal and small-scale miners and large-scale mines. This leads to a set of recommendations to be implemented by governments. We also have multiple case studies all along the report that have an illustration of the topics that we are covering. They cover, for example, institutional support for ASGM tailings management in Brazil or in Tanzania, responsible recovery of mercury in Colombia, ISM-LSM relationship in Ghana, etc., etc. So there are many case studies to really provide some real case example. And we should not forget the annexes that contain detailed information about national legal framework on tailing to add more meat to the to this research. Next slide, please. Then let's discuss a little bit about the methodology. Greg mentioned it early. The difficulty that we had at the beginning is the limited available literature on the topic. So we developed this report through extensive consultation with member countries, with experts of the topic, and with interested stakeholders. IGF members have been consulted on the project scoping, then have validated the scoping report. And after expert input, internal and external reviews, findings have been shared and comments have been addressed. And after a final peer review and 1.5 years, we're happy to be able to officially launch this report today. And Clémence mentioned it as well. Issues that are not covered yet in this report or not completely covered will be covered in the next global policy guidance. Next slide, please. So before going into the meat of the report, I would like to provide some background and the context of this study, even though many of you know all this concept. So this study is about the sound management and reprocessing of tailings coming from ASGM activities and tailings that are contaminated by mercury. So I will just briefly introduce this concept before diving into the full report itself. So this number, Greg already mentioned most of these numbers. ISM in general, so artisanal and small-scale mining, you have between 40-50 million workers in ISM in the world. So it's huge. It represents most of the miners in the globe are ISM. So if you meet a miner, there's a high chance that it will be an artisanal miner statistically. And almost half of them mine gold. So there are artisanal and small-scale gold miner. Estimation around 20 million of this ASGM worker in more than 80 different countries. And ASGM also accounts for 20% of the world gold supply, which is really significant here. We also have to be conscious and make the difference between artisanal and small scale. They're usually grouped together, RSM, artisanal and small scale mining, but they represent two different realities. Artisanal mining generally refers to individual groups, small family using manual, traditional, labor-intensive techniques, whereas small scale involve more advanced techniques. Some mechanization is coming with bigger organization. It's organized through cooperative or small companies, for example. And this also has some implication about how we can engage both of these group, artisanal on one side and small scale on the other side, on how we can engage them to try to tackle the issue we are here to discuss together. And finally, ISGM, like all ISM operation, have a high degree of informality, and this brings and exacerbates many of the issues that will be presented in the report. Just to finalize on the slide, we also have to keep in mind that the numbers that I have shared are estimates. Due to the high degree of informalities, variation in estimates are observed, of course, but nevertheless, the order of magnitude stay valid, so we can still consider this number. Next slide, please. So now if we look deeper into directly operation, I would say ISGM operation follows similar but simplified life cycle than large-scale operation. For example, the prospection stage is usually really limited, as operator cannot afford to spend money without a rapid payback period. And here there are slight difference between really artisanal and small-scale operation. Then extraction of the ore takes place, where the overburden is removed or pits are dug to get access to the minerals zone. Extraction techniques vary according to the geology, the hardness of the rocks, and the proximity to water bodies, among other factors. And after the ore has been excavated, we are at the processing stage, which involves crushing the ore to be able to liberate the gold. And then we need to separate the ore from the gang, which is all the materials that we don't want. Basically, everything that is not gold in this case. And this separation can be done using different techniques. You can have some gravity, which uses a specific characteristic of gold, which has high specific density to separate it from the rest of the material, because indeed gold has a density almost close to 20, so it's 20 times heavier than water, for example, for the same volume. So 1 liter of gold, if you want to simplify, 1 liter of gold is 20 kilograms, so it's much heavier. Other techniques involve dissolution through cyanidation. And finally, you have this problematic technique that brings us together here, which is the mercury amalgamation by artisanal miners. So when the gold when the processing stage is done, the gold can be sold on the market, and what remains, usually on sites, are the tailings. And it's almost all that have been extracted. So next slide, please. So now the ASGM tailings. So the tailings are all the waste from ore processing after comminution and separation. Comminution are the action to crush the ore, and then the separation that we discussed. And from what we've seen on the previous slide, tailings consist of most of the original material, because indeed usual grades for all deposits exploited by ASGM are between 10 grams per ton. This means that 99.9999% of what we extract are not gold. It's not what we want. So all this material end up in tailings. In the tailings, you have also all the gold that has not been recovered. You had all the what was added during the processing, so water, mercury, among others. And of course, you have the gold that has been extracted that is not in the tailings. And what we have also to keep in mind is that ASGM usually show really low gold recoveries, with a generally admitted order of magnitude of 30% recovery. Of course, it depends on the geology, on the technology used, on the initial grade of the ore. There are many factors that affect this number, but usually the recovery are much lower than for large-scale mine. This means that there remains lots of gold in the tailing. It's a potential for reprocessing, and that could be the incentive to come back to reprocess the tailings and to take care of the mercury that could remain in the tailing. And finally, tailing from ASGM are really a safety and health hazard, and it's a source of potential long-term environmental pollution, and especially from the mercury that has been used during the processing stage. Next slide, please. And now I will just provide few facts about mercury use in ASGM, why mercury, and why it's really used by the ASGM. Mercury has a unique capacity to create an amalgam with the gold, and as a result, it's used at the separation stage, where mercury gold compound can then be recovered. When recovered, the mercury, which has a lower boiling point than gold, can then be evaporated when the amalgam is heated, and then gold can be recovered. It's widely used by ASGM for many reasons, and mostly because mercury is quite easy to access. It's relatively cheap, it's easy to use, and the process is fast. And more importantly, the miner has a full control over the process, and it can be used even for small quantities of material. So the mercury, in a way, answers one of the main issues in the sector, which is a trust issue, so that the processor have a full control over the separation of gold, which is also a sort of important considerant that we have to keep in mind when we try to address the issue of mercury use. And then after that, mercury is released in the environment when burnt to recover the gold, but also in the tailings as losses occur during the process. And it can stay in the soils and in river stream where it can bioaccumulate and be present in the whole food chain. With higher concentration, the more you advance in this food chain. Mercury is highly neurotoxic and with aggravated impact on vulnerable people such as children and women, especially pregnant women. And its general use of stores should be banned whenever it is possible. And as mentioned by Clémence in the beginning, we have an international agreement, the Minamata Convention, that has been put in place with the specific objective of protecting the earth and the environment from mercury. And finally, I would say that the issue is really serious. Its scale is huge, and it's estimated that ASGM is a sector generating the largest mercury emission. And of course, with the caveat that number can only be estimates due to the informality of the sector. I've already mentioned this, but again, the order of magnitude stays relevant, and this really justifies why we are here today and why this report is needed. I will close here and now leave the floor to the next presenter to go deeper into the report, and I would like to thank you very much for your attentions.
Thank you so much, Gregoire. We have interesting experience sharing on the chat as well. Thank you for continuing to share your experience. I'm going to invite Giorgio, Nelly, and Vida to present the finding and recommendation of this report. I think we are all excited to hear that part as well. So, Giorgio, the floor is yours first.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'll talk a little bit. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, I'll do a quick overview of technical considerations. First of all, why do we have tailings? How are they generated? Of course, it would be great to produce gold with no tailings, right? We all understand that. It would be great if we could do it without tailings. But, guys, gold grades, they vary according to the type of deposit. It could be alluvial, which is loose material, can be hard rock, can be waste scavenging, right? But anyway, the grades are always just a few grams per ton. This means that the miners have to process 1 ton of material to extract a few grams of gold. So that is why we have this huge amount of tailings generated in the ASGM process, okay? And after extracting, the processing method also is relevant, especially after the comminution, which is grinding. After you grind the material, the way you separate is important, right? You have gravity separation. We have very good examples of ASGM districts working with gravity, getting good results on gravity separation, like Ghana and Tanzania, where they organize hubs where the miners send their material for processing. There is also magnetic separation that helps separating the ore from the rest of the material, and flotation. In flotation, we have good examples in French Guiana, and Madre de Dios. Just to have an example, in Madre de Dios, they got up to 86% gold recovery using gravity and flotation. Okay, these are clean methods, or cleaner methods. Okay, the question is, if we have all these clean methods, why we still see mercury being used? It's like Gregoire mentioned. Fine gold is difficult to recover, so it's simpler and easier to use mercury to recover that gold. even if it's not that efficient, okay? But it's easy and simple. It does not require any specialized equipment. So that is why people keep on using mercury, even though there are other methods, other cleaner methods that could recover gold as well. Next slide, please. So how does, you know, the industry does, like the large scale mining sector works? How do they work with gold recovery? Well, they use chemical leaching. Chemical leaching is great because it can recover more than 92% of the gold, even the fine portion of gold. So you get great recoveries. So it's very good. Yes, yes, but it's cyanide. Okay, it's a highly toxic chemical component. So we need very strict process control in order to handle it. And the ASGM sector does not have the capability yet to do that. And the complement to that is direct smelting, where you can get gold bars with high purity, and that's a very standard approach. But usually it's only in the final phase of the recovery method. Okay, but regarding chemical leaching, although it's great and we understand it's difficult to manage, there is a very complex situation when you try to process, like Jane just mentioned earlier. If you try to process tailings contaminated with mercury, you process with chemical leaching, you introduce a very important risk, health risk, which is creating cyanide and mercury complexes, which are highly toxic. So we have to be very careful with that, to the point that the Minamata Convention considers that the worst practice in the sector. Next slide, please. So can we change the slide, please? Yes, okay, good. So, no, the previous one, please. Sorry about that. We have, yeah, okay. So what it means, if we keep on using mercury, we have lots of risk there. Yeah, we can if we do not store those tailings properly, we will release mercury into the environment. And if the tailings still contain gold, fine gold, people will want to reprocess it with cyanide, and then it creates this risky situation that I just mentioned. Okay, and in addition to that, if proper methods for disposal and reclamation are not adopted, you again will be releasing mercury to the environment. So the way it's being done right now by many ASGM producers is not acceptable any longer. Okay, because you have all these risks of releasing mercury and creating very toxic cyanide and mercury compounds. So we have to avoid that. How do we do that? Next slide, please. We use proper methods for storing the tailings. First of all, separating tailings that have mercury and those that do not have mercury, because they will be handled differently. Of course, the ones with mercury, you have to take proper care of monitoring and protecting any eventual release, right? When it comes to trying to reprocess those tailings to recover the fine gold still present there, you have to separate the ones without mercury. You can process it with chemical leaching, not a problem. Okay, but if they contain mercury, like we'll see later on from Pure Earth some examples, you will have to treat those tailings before reprocessing. You have to remove the mercury, you have to store and dispose the mercury properly. Okay, then you can proceed to chemical leaching, and then all the tailings, whatever they are, you have to find the proper way to dispose and do the proper reclamation on terrain. Guys, this is what society expects from us and from the ASGM sector. So we have to go towards that goal. It's difficult, it will take time, will take a huge effort from all of you, but we have to do it. Well, just a final comment, guys. As you've seen so far, and as you know as well, there is no silver bullet for this problem. There is not a magic solution. We need commitment from the governments, and we need commitment from the society in general, okay, to address this challenge. We need to train and educate miners. So I'm very glad to see that IGF is progressing towards capacity building. But we also need you guys that are from government agencies. We need these agencies to be strong and to be present all the time in the districts. You cannot really do an inspection and disappear for 6 months because you don't know what will happen during those 6 months. So you have to find ways to be present and help them and be sure they do the proper, all these processes in the proper way. And we need investment, right? All the governments will have to find ways to invest in these communities to help them to make the necessary progress, okay? I've seen an announcement today from an organization in Africa called Mining on Top Africa. And they said, like, there's something written like something like that. What's coming is the mining revolution towards a clean and sustainable future. ASGM should follow the same. That's it, Clemence.
Thank you so much for this passionate presentation. I will invite Nelly to continue to share the finding on policy considerations. Nelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you to my colleague, Giorgio. It's been fantastic working with you on this research. Your energy is always very enthusing and very infectious. But I'd like to first just thank the IGF and the funders, Department of State of the United States, for the opportunity to work on this report. And again, Giorgio, my lead partner in the research, and all the other people that contributed to this work. Under the capable guidance of Clemence. I think Clemence, over the last 18 months or so, sometimes it must have felt like you're herding 1,000 cats. But with your capable hands, you did a fantastic job of holding us all together to produce this fantastic output, and which touches on many, many varied aspects of the artisanal small-scale gold mining, tailings, and reprocessing in different ways. So Gregor and Giorgio, thank you for setting the scene. What I'm going to touch on in the next few slides is around governance. I think one of the sayings that is very common is if you don't plan, you plan to fail. And I think governance frameworks are what helps us and what helps international and national organizations to actually be able to plan to do things. And therefore, governance frameworks in how they link to ASGM tailings management is very important. I'll also touch on how this topic of ASGM tailings management and reprocessing, how it touches on what I consider one of the most challenging issues in mining, which is the relationship between artisanal small-scale gold mining and the large-scale mining sector. And later on, as Clemence indicated, I'll hand over to Viola, who will touch on tax issues before I hand it back to me to actually just summarize some of the recommendations from our report. So the stage has been set, and I think that I don't have to repeat what has already been indicated, but it's just diving into the issues around governance. If I can start at an international level, I think our research, we found that there isn't much in terms of governance frameworks around ASGM tailings management and reprocessing. The two seminal documents that we came across, or guidelines that we came across, are both linked to the United Nations Environment Programme. One is the sound tailings management in artisanal small-scale gold mining. And the second, again, also linked to UNEP MOEGF processes under the Planet Gold best management practices for cyanide use in small-scale gold mining. These two outputs, though they're too few to be just by themselves, but they do provide really crucial insights around mitigating the risks that we are associated with ASGM tailings. And I think one of the things that I would also want to point out, linked to comments made by both Clémence and Gregoire around the Minamata Convention on Mercury Pollution, is that through the national action plans that are required for countries where you have ASGM that uses mercury, there is a need to have national action plans. And in these national action plans, the addressing of tailings management at a very grassroots level is required. And then a fact to point out there is that of the countries that have signed and ratified the Minamata Convention on Mercury Pollution, about 33 countries have finalized their plans, at least at the time that we finalized our report. And again, on record from UNEP is that another 45 countries are currently developing their national action plans for management of the ASGM sector with the intention of reducing mercury emissions and generally mercury pollution. So the journey requires that we have a holistic approach. I think Giorgio spoke quite eloquently and passionately about this, that we need to have a holistic approach. We need to integrate different aspects of policy. We need to take technical considerations, as well as making sure that we have the frameworks to be able to have guidance, that starting off with what we already have in place. We think from our analysis that if we use those existing international frameworks, we have the basis of actually charting a pathway to achieve stronger governance frameworks around the management of ASGM tailings, as well as the governance around the reprocessing. And we think those international frameworks set the stage for regional governance frameworks. And the reason why we point out regional governance frameworks, firstly, because our finding is that there is hardly anything at a regional level. And yet it is through regional blocks that we can actually actualize national action by having the policies and regulatory frameworks to actually manage this issue. So that cascading from international frameworks to regional frameworks, we think is very important going forward. In the next slide, we talk to the issue of national legislation, and I've just pointed out. So in the work that we did a kind of snapshot or a sample, largely guided by the members of the IGF. We looked at legislative frameworks from some countries, and what we found is that most countries in our sample prohibit the use of mercury, quite a lot of them also prohibit cyanide. And while the mining codes of all the countries provide for regulations on tailings management, this is largely targeting industrial scale mining. Specific provisions for the ASM sector are missing. There are some, you will find that at a regional level, as I pointed out, there isn't much provided, even sometimes just general ASM administration or management, let alone the issue of tailings management. But there are a few countries where there is some provisions that could be used to manage the issue of tailings. And I think Ghana and Tanzania and Colombia are good examples of some of those countries. However, our general finding is that in spite of all these provisions, that because the enforcement is lacking, the capacity to implement those regulations is lacking, and also the lack of specificity, there's still a long way to go with regards to how we actually manage the sector. And one aspect that's also important to point out is the fact that the sector is pointed out by Gregoire and Clémence and Jane and Greg, is the informality of the sector. The informality of the sector does not lend itself to the good management of ASM tailings. And therefore, there still remains a lot of work that we need to carry out. I think in the next slide, I'll try to quickly share with you the thinking around, or what we found when we think about how the ASGM sector interfaces with large-scale mining sector. I think we're all aware of the complexities and the intricate and the challenging environment that happens, or that is created when these two sectors actually come together. What we found is that, and what we all know, I'm sure, is the fact that the partnerships or the relationships between ASGM and LSM vary. So they start from, if we start from the formal side, there are formal ASGM operations that are standalone, people are well permitted by government and complying with all the necessary regulations. And these would have, from a tailings management perspective, would have autonomy around managing their own tailings. So basically, in terms of that relationship with LSM, they're just neighbors, right? So the intention of just being good neighbors. Then the other type of formal ASGM operation that you can find is where there's ASGM operations actually happening on an LSM concession. And the framework under which this normally happens is some kind of agreement, whether it's subleasing or what is sometimes referred to as tributing, where there is an agreement with the large-scale mining operator or the mining right holder with a group of ASGM operators, usually facilitated by government, to have a kind of win-win let-live collaboration or coexistence or cohabitation. And this obviously needs a very intricate coordination for it to happen. Then if we move to the informal part of ASGM, so here there is two extremes that we can think about. There is in the informal ASGM or ASM even for other commodities, which we can use in quotation the words legitimate. So by the strict letter of the law, they are illegal. But from a developmental perspective, because we recognize that there is need for livelihood, particularly for poor rural communities, and that they are not linked to nefarious activities. So there is a kind of acceptance that these are the kind of activities that could be supported through formalization. So you have that. But still, of course, they do pose challenges for the large-scale operators, but not as large or as difficult challenges as you would on the extreme end of that informality, which is where you have ASGM activities that are linked to actual criminality. So these are the kind of activities that are linked to international illicit trading in gold, to a lot of abuses, and they are not tolerated at all. And large-scale mining companies still have to deal with that. And the reason for trying to distinguish in between the two is because the responses are different in terms of how the different actors respond to them, but also in terms of how we deal with issues of tailings management and reprocessing, how we actually consider those. But I think it's important just to bear in mind that ultimately we will always have this interface between ASGM and LSM, and it's important that we actually find solutions that are appropriate depending on the type of interface that is actually at play. I just want also just lastly on this particular slide, just point out the issue around gender, even though it may appear anecdotal because I'm mentioning it in the slide, but throughout the whole report, we have touched on the issue of gender dynamics and making sure that we think about gender mainstreaming even from the perspective of ASGM Tailings management and reprocessing. And I think for me, from having worked for a large-scale mining company before, I know that LSM is a source of resources, and resources are important to deal with some of these things around gender dynamics. And therefore, it's an opportunity to actually mainstream up some of these opportunities so that we make sure that women carefully and carefully supported to be able to have meaningful livelihoods out of the sector. I think this is my last slide for now. I'd like to hand over to Viola, who is going to take us through the next part of the findings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelly. I'll take you through a snapshot of the tax section of the report. The basic building block of the tax system in the mining sector is made up of royalties and corporate income tax. There are other payments, but the main ones are really the royalties and the corporate income tax. Most countries differentiate fiscal regimes for the large-scale sector, the medium-scale and artisanal small-scale mining sector. And most of you will agree, as also mentioned by other speakers, that it's been because the artisanal and small-scale mining is very informal, it's been very difficult to collect taxes from this sector. So gold, this is a good point it's something that's very important to remember even when we start to think about taxation of the gold that is reprocessed from the tailings. So gold recovered from the tailings from the ASM sector in most jurisdictions would follow the fiscal regime applicable in the ASM sector. And so it's important, one of the things that it's important when establishing a taxing framework for the tailings is for government to map out who are the exact players that benefit from the gold processed from the tailings. So in the report, we map out that first, it could be, for example, the miner who opts to process their own tailings and therefore sell the gold. So the tax would be on the miner. Another scenario that we map out in the report is, for example, the miner may opt to sell the tailings to a processing plant who, because of the economies of scale, would get more tailings from different miners and then process to get the gold and then sell it. In that case, the tax would fall on the processing plant and not the miner. So it's really important for us to map out who should be, for example, eligible to the taxes that government would prescribe for this sector. On the next slide, I'll touch on a couple of recommendations we highlight for the government. Next slide, thank you. So first, as discussed by other presenters, this is a very new sector. So the first recommendation is for government to develop a tax framework for the ASGM tailings, for those who don't have. And with this, if this is in the legislation, then it provides a basis for the taxation process. Second is governments might consider giving tax and non-tax incentives to actors that reprocess the tailings to extract the residual gold. Again, based from the research that has been done within the mining sector, is that we've established that cost-based incentives are more effective in the mining sector as opposed to profit-based incentives. Examples of cost-based incentives are, for example, credits on infrastructure or accelerated depreciation, which helps, for example, the miners to defer tax to a later period, not to avoid, but to defer tax to a later period, especially at the start where the capital costs are really huge and very expensive at that point. So government might consider incentives, for example, on the infrastructure for processing the tailings, to give some form of incentives for them to enable that the tailings to be processed. Third is, again, for governments to ensure all players that profit from the tailings processing are taxed. Again, going back to the scenarios that are highlighted at the start, that it's important for governments to map out who is going to benefit from the gold that's been processed, and then that tax is attributed correctly to the right players. Another recommendation we had in the report is for the government to establish a robust transfer pricing system for the sale of tailings. And here, because we acknowledge that, for example, miners could be selling tailings to related party processing plants, and therefore government should ensure that if for transaction that takes place between related parties, that we have arm's length prices or prices that would be charged if these two parties are not related. So government should ensure that they have a robust mechanisms for transfer pricing, but also lastly, for governments to increase their oversight in terms of monitoring the tailings processing in order to ensure, for example, how much gold is processed from the tailings, how can you verify the quantity, how can they verify the quality? Because remember, tax is applicable on how much quality, how much quantity has been derived. So again, our recommendations for government to increase their oversight into this new sector for them to be able to collect the applicable taxes. Thank you very much. I'll pass it over back to Nelly to talk about the general recommendations. Thank you.
Viola, thank you very much for starting off on the recommendations. So we structured the recommendations of our work around 5 areas: tailings management, tailings reprocessing and valorization, mine site management, and some social considerations, as well as very specific policy and regulatory recommendations. So starting off with the tailings management, I'm mindful of the fact that I think we're probably running a little bit late in terms of time. So I will not talk to each of these recommendations. You can see them in the slide there, but what I can do now is just to point out some of the issues that we were trying to address or look at in terms of the recommendations. So for example, we have recommendations that are trying to respond to the issue of irresponsible chemical use, the use of mercury in terms of ore amalgamation, unsafe chemical leaching, poor tailings management. We also considered how in some jurisdictions tailings are being dumped into water sources. The issue that has been raised previously around mercury contaminated tailings and how they are managed, particularly in terms of trying to minimize the creation of tailings that are mercury laden. We also have recommendations in the slide that talk to the issue of lack of knowledge about what and where are the tailings, where are they located, what do they contain, what are some of the risks that we can identify from knowing the chemistry and mineralogy of them. We also have recommendations around transportation of tailings because this is not always done very safely. So those recommendations that you see in the slide are actually trying to address that. I think the one that I can point out is the use of geospatial tools and periodic sampling so that we can monitor those tailings. But some of those, you can find them in the report and are pointed out there. And for time's sake, I'll just move on to the next slide. So this is the second part of the recommendations, which is around tailings reprocessing and valorization. I think so the challenges here that we are talking to are around the fact that the reason why there is reprocessing of tailings is because there's, as already pointed out in the previous speakers' presentations, is that there is value left in the tailings. So we're reprocessing to recover the remaining gold. And because, again, as already been highlighted, the use of mercury is a big challenge. And when you have tailings that contain mercury, reprocessing them, particularly because one of the most common ways of reprocessing these tailings is chemical leaching. And chemical leaching then does create those complexes that are more bioavailable and therefore presenting all sorts of health and environmental problems. And therefore it's an issue that we need to, when we talk about reprocessing tailings, we naturally need to think about that. So how do we make sure that we reduce first of all, mercury tailings, and also how do we actually leach these tailings when wanting to reprocess. So our recommendations touch on the need to educate different actors in the value chain, your miners, your processors, so that they know how to learn how not to mix those mercury-free tailings and mercury-laden tailings. Also, just to educate them on the dangers of that cyanidation or leaching of mercury-containing tailings. Our recommendations also touch on the fact that it is important to make sure that the technologies that are mercury-free, that don't create tailings with mercury, are researched on, not only from a technical perspective. I note about some work that we did with UNEP that actually spoke to the fact that even when the technologies exist, the uptake and adoption of those technologies doesn't happen as efficiently as that. So some innovations around how we can make sure that those technologies are actually adopted and actually used so that we don't create this mercury-free laden tailings. Another example in recommendation, which talks to, I think Alfonso is going to talk to this in the case study on Colombia, is around removal of mercury so that it is not in the tailings that are being reprocessed. Incentivization of tailings reprocessing is very important, and we have a recommendation around how government could consider setting up or at least supporting processing of ASGM tailings, maybe by providing fiscal incentives like Viola indicated. The last issue that I would like to point out with this slide is around the fact that tailings, ASGM tailings, don't only contain residual gold of economic quantities, but it also may contain some of the minerals that are considered critical minerals. So there is a whole debate around critical minerals, strategic minerals, critical raw materials that I think you're all aware of. So some of these tailings may contain some of these critical minerals. So we think it's important that government actually think about mapping the tailings that they have in their country so that they can actually identify what these secondary minerals are, and also a concerted effort around skills development and training to enable ASGM operators to actually be able to extract these meaningfully. So those are some of the recommendations around tailings reprocessing and valorization. So on the next slide, I'll touch very lightly on the recommendations that are linked to mine site management. I think I've touched quite a bit on this in the previous slides, but maybe I can just point out that some of the issues that we're trying to address with these recommendations are related to that there's limited restoration and remediation of mine sites, perhaps because there's lack of funding, or because there isn't a collaborative effort being put in place, or because there isn't the regulatory enforcement that is required. We also make recommendations that are linked to the fact that there are opportunities that exist in the LSM ASGM interface around collaborating with ASGM operators, where some skills transfer can happen, technology transfer can happen. The tributing arrangement that I mentioned earlier can also happen, which creates an environment where ASGM tailings can actually be better managed. I think on this, I think one of the key recommendations that we make is around having a framework for the management of ASGM tailings. We think this is missing, and we think that some of the guidance documents and frameworks that exist for the industrial scale mining operations can be effectively adopted and used for the ASGM sector. In the next slide, our recommendations touch on social issues or social considerations. And these, I think there's the many social considerations that we think about in terms of the ASGM sector, but the two that we point out specifically here, one to do with gender concerns in terms of gender mainstreaming and gender dynamics, and also the issue of child labor. So we make recommendations about dealing with some of the issues around the fact that women are particularly vulnerable and get left out of the opportunities that may exist in reprocessing, or may suffer unduly because they are disadvantaged and may suffer some negative impacts. With the issue of child labor, the recommendation that we make is that there exist ILO protocols that governments can ratify, and then that can be followed up by specific national programs to make sure that children are not found in these situations, the worst kind types of labor. In the last slide, our recommendations which are more relevant to the members of the IGF who are their main stakeholders is regards to policy and regulatory considerations. I think, like I pointed out when I spoke about the governance frameworks, there is definitely a lack of, we feel, a lack of international support around ASGM tailings management. And we think that there is definitely space for supporting national level frameworks that are cascaded from regional frameworks, that are cascaded from international frameworks. And it is on this basis that we recommend that we think that there is need to have in place a dedicated framework for ASGM tailings management and reprocessing in terms of governance. And we think that if it is established at a national level, it can then quite easily cascade to the regional and national frameworks that we all need to address this very, very important issue. I think I would like to end there and hand back to Clemence. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you so much, Nelly and Viola. This is a lot of information to impact, and hopefully we'll have time to take questions from the audience. But before we get there, I'm really happy to be able to pass the floor to Alfonso Rodriguez for Pure Earth. I think this is really an insightful presentation that we're looking forward to. Alfonso, the floor is yours.
Clement, thank you so much for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here to share our experience in our project. So let me share the screen. Let me know if you can see my screen right now. Can you see my screen right now? Okay.
Yes.
So I want to share the experience of our project in Colombia, funded by the Department of State. I want to say thank you to Jane Tennyson, who was a very big support in this project. And also, I want to say, Pure, as a Pure, we are an environmental NGO, international NGO that work for low and middle income countries, basically very close to the governments. And our focus are principal in two contaminants, mercury, that's the topic for today, and also lead contamination. And sometimes both contaminants are very related, but today we want to talk about the mining or mining tailings, or how to manage the tailings from Colombia coming from the artisanal gold mining. Basically, all my previous speaker described what is the problem, and I don't want to repeat the description that Giorgio just say about what is the problem. That's some real pictures that I take from our project in different areas of Colombia. You can see coming from alluvial mining and hard rock mining. And I can say that the environmental impact for mercury and tailings are more related with hard rock mining than alluvial. Basically, I can say 70% than the other ones. But the hard rock mining, in comparison to the other, is the most impact in the environment. It's coming from illegal mining, principally in Colombia. I should say a lot of concentration of mercury, residential gold, high concentration of gold as well. But something interesting in the market, underground market. At the beginning of the project, 1 ton of tailing, the cost was at least $30. And after 5 years of the project, it started in 2018, we finalized this project in 2023. The cost of the same ton of tailing was 180. It's incredible how it increased the price inside the underground mining communities, because they realize that the tailings have a lot of value with the gold that is residential gold. As you say perfectly, one of the most effective technology to extract the gold is the cyanidation process. So that's the problem, the mix with mercury. At the beginning of the project, no legislation at all for tailings management, still not specific in the regulation. However, there is a new law in 2022 that permit use some residential or waste to reprocess as a circular economy option, that we can use that law, to start doing, to reprocess legally this kind of material. However, there is no clear rules how to put this gold that could be obtained for these tailings in the market legally. And finally, there is a dilemma in Colombia between two ministers: is a hazardous waste or is a mining material, or in this new regulation. That's still the problem. Okay, basically, very briefly, we have some pillars for the project. Basically, the idea was to identify a technology to recover mercury or capture mercury from tailings. That's the biggest objective or pillars of this project. We did a workshop, 3 days technical workshop in Medellin, Colombia, with national and international experts. I want to say also thank you to Marcelo Vega. He was one of the technical support in this project all the time. And after this workshop, we identified at least 10, 13 potential alternative of technologies to use to recover mercury, but we decided to select one called copper plates that we will describe very shortly afterwards, because there is a low cost, high efficiency, and very easy to implement on field. It's not a new technology. This technology has been used for years, but we did an adaptation for the Colombian context, and with this project in the future, we can adapt this technology to the context of any country. Also, we did some regulatory framework for tailings management, and also all the financial mechanisms to how to recover this mercury. And one of the problems also was after we recover the mercury, how to handle storage, transport, and disposal in a safety way. And that was the last part of the project. I will show you we could implement the first storage unit for mercury in Latin America. It's small, but at least it's the first pilot that we are running with the government of Colombia, basically. So talking about the copper plates, that's the series of the improvement of the technology. Basically, is a plate of copper, but is we cover this copper with silver in order to capture the mercury. Technically, the silver can capture the mercury as the same the mercury captured the gold. And the idea was to put how to manage the tailings through the plates to capture the most amount of mercury as we can. We designed different types. This is cascade mode. This is tunnel cascade, tunnel option, sorry. And the last one was an innovation that we did for isolate areas and try to put recirculate the tailings many times, because we can put this technology in a plant, in a sanitization plant, for example, before use SANAE to reduce the concentration of mercury, but also to clean the tailings that are abandoned in faraway areas in some point. At the end of the many tests, we could treat at least 300 tons of tailings of different areas of Colombia. You can see in this picture how the copper plates can capture the mercury. This also basically elemental mercury, liquid mercury that you can see, and also they go to the plates and stay there forever if we want. The differentiation in this picture, for example, one of the barriers or limitation is the age of the tailings. Sometimes if we get tailings very new, it means 3 months, 2 months ago, it looks like this one. This is a tailings more or less 1 year ago, but we found tailings that more than 5 years old. So this is the oxidation of the plate is very high. So the lifetime of the copper and the plate we will reduce according with the age of the tailings. That is a limitation that we need to keep improving at some point. But with all these tests that we did, we get at least 84 of reduction of elemental mercury, of total mercury from the original tailings at the end. So it's a significant reduction of mercury on the tailings. And then after this process, obviously, they can process with any technologies, annihilation, gravitation, but reduce the 100% mercury basically is impossible. This is not a local problem. This is a global problem, as you mentioned, many countries. Some of the biggest issue that we try to forward, keep working in this, Peru, Madre Dios, Ghana, Indonesia is a big problem. I had the opportunity to visit them, and the problem there is massive problem in Indonesia. We also did this training for how to construct the copper plates and manage the tailings in Costa Rica. And the other 2 countries that we try to get more pilot tests is Philippines and Tanzania. As you can see, it's not a local problem in Colombia, it's everywhere. And finally, one of the biggest goal of the project was to put in place this small storage unit. Technically, it's not difficult, it's a commercial unit, but the problem was put all the government agencies in one page. It means in Colombia, for example, there is a responsibility for the army or the police when go to the site because there are illegal mining. On the other hand, is the general attorney or the attorney because they need to start a legal process and need to keep the samples of the mercury as a proof, as a evidence of the legal case. That's another problem. And the other is the responsibility of all this process. Is coming from the Ministry of Mining, is coming from the Ministry of Environment. That's like an internal fight, how to define all these protocols. So we could put a pilot test, and we can put this unit in a environmental, regional environmental authority, so they can manage this process properly. And you can see the capacity is very small. It's only 300 liters, but in terms of the amount of mercury that we are trying to recover is enough. And also we did the contract with another provider to put this mercury in an stabilization process with sulfur at the end as a final dispersion as well. This project is running at the moment, finalized in October in this year. So we are trying to keep that. And the interesting of this one is that the government want to keep forcing another entities to put more storage units around the country. That's basically that I mentioned before. I want to spend more time. And at the end of the project, you can see some very good indicators that we get. We produce 8 technical documents talking about the tailings management protocol, how the copper place protocol, all the pilot tests that we did are available for you to download to our website. Also, we put in place 2 copper place modules, one in Yali, Antioquia, in one place in Colombia, and the other in other part of Colombia, in Santander as well. We could train more than 280 miners. That's very important for us, with the government as well. And also we try to innovate more, because this is an option. It's not 100%. There is still mercury inside the tailings. So we try to put more materials as an option in the cyanidation process to see if we can reduce more the percentage of mercury. We are in that process. And basically also we guarantee that the gold production was not affected. So the gold production, the loss of gold for the miner at the end, that is interesting for them, is not too much. They get a lot of gold to sell and get a very good profit at the end. At this also, you can download all these documents, all the recovery mercury that we technology that we review, the tailings management protocol, the copper place implementation, and economic model, how a few investment for the miner and put in place and get money from this process is very easy for them. And finally, the pilot test that we run with the other technologies to try to precipitate mercury in the process. That's my presentation for now. So I open to answer any question. Clemens, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I put the floor in you.
Thank you so much, Alfonso. This is really impressive. We saw in one of the latest slides that 90% of gold recovery from gold. This is really quite interesting, and I think that the goal also of this report and this research is to show that there's opportunities for community for sound and responsible management and reprocessing and tailings. I think we have around 10 minutes to take questions from the audience. We have received a number of questions already from the Q&A and the chat that we've been answering, but I'm wondering if any of our speakers actually would like to answer one question that we have here. In terms of support, not only the AGF question, we can take it, but there's a question for presenters, so for all of us, if from the research and the 33 countries that we have studied, through the National Adaptation Plan, if there's any country that you believe or that is really in need of support for tailing management reprocessing. I think this is, based on the different presentation that we have, we know that it's a challenge everywhere. But I'm wondering if, Nelly, if there's any region, let's talk more about region than country, where you believe that the challenges is more dire than others.
Yeah. Look, I of the content. Thank you very much for the question, and again, thank you all for taking the time to listen to us. But I think that of the regions where you have substantial ASGM, which is Latin America, Africa, and Asia, I think in terms of the numbers, I think that Africa perhaps has a lot of ASGM. If we exclude the ASM in China, for example, and we're looking more in terms of the smaller countries. But I think I wouldn't want to say there are countries that are more in need. The reason why, because the numbers alone do not tell the full story, because you can have a country where the actual mercury use or mercury releases are a bit low, but they may be in biodiversity hotspots, which actually need immediate attention, as opposed to just because you have large amounts of mercury in a country. So I think it's a very difficult thing. If you look at the map that we have in the report, for example, Indonesia is supposed to have the largest mercury use. But when I look at that list, actually, there are some countries which in my opinion, given the fact that we all understand that the statistics in the sector are not very robust, I would say maybe the actual numbers are much higher. So yeah, so I know I'm not answering your question, but all that to say that I think it's a very difficult question to answer, just to say, I think this country needs it more. I think it really has to be more investigation based on certain criteria around biodiversity, around exposure to communities, and not just about the amounts of mercury being released. Thank you. Maybe Gregoire and George, you want to add?
Thank you so much, Nelly. I think you were really comprehensive in your response. We have also received questions from the audience, and I will give the first one to Giorgio, and maybe Alfonso also can complement based on his experience in Colombia. So the question is that what are the key challenges associated with ASGM tailings management, particularly in regions with constrained resources and limited access to technology, and how these challenges can be overcome? It's a big question. So Giorgio first, and then Alfonso, you can share your experience. You already mentioned that in Colombia, how were you able to navigate the challenges and get some concrete results?
Okay, well, there is one point, an important point, Clemence, that is, by definition, ASGM operations are located in remote places. So they are difficult to reach and difficult to work with, okay? Because like in my case, I work at the university. I love to be in the air conditioned and doing my research on the computer, but the only way to make a difference is to be there. So that is why I say I mentioned that, and in a way, everybody is supporting the same view here as speakers. There are a few drivers that will provoke the change that we need and that we want, okay? They vary on intensity according to the location and so on, but they always include, I think, 4 points, okay? First of all, legislation, current legislation that is up to date with the current standards, and proper public policy. If the legislation is not up to speed with what is required, the countries will have problems. So first of all, it's legislation and public policy. Second, I mentioned that already, the agencies should be there. They must be there, present, and be there all the time. We cannot go there, spend a few weeks, and leave them alone. We don't know what will happen. So the agencies, and this includes environmental, mining, training, education, capacity building, whatever. But they have to be there, present, and all the time. Okay. Third, like programs for capacity buildings. These miners, they're always normally they are entrepreneurs, right? They're business people. If they understand the difference, the advantage, and how much more they can do for themselves and for society, they will embrace it. So capacity building, like adjusted to the ASGM approach, is essential as well. And of course, partnerships, like Alfonso was mentioning. You have to have other people helping them, other organizations helping them. You have to make the connections with the external world, so the best practices can be implemented locally in these communities. Okay.
Thank you. This is really great pointers. And I'm wondering if Alfonso have something else to add and share also how you implement some of the strategies in Colombia to get some impressive results as you did.
Yes, in addition to your comments, that is completely right, the legislation. One of the biggest challenge is to understand the culture of the miners, because the culture is different to the legislators, and also is different for the general people of the biggest miners company as well. For example, in Colombia, some of the comments, when you go to the community, miner community, they say, okay, we use mercury because it's the only option that we have, and we live for the mercury. It's more people that live for the mercury that die. That's one of the premises that they use, and this is a biggest challenge to break this culture. And also, I think the idea is to understand the miners. They want to change. They want to provide more innovation, but the process that the government sometimes create is not very easy for them. So to get formalization or to get more resource for the economy, or to invest in, for example, in this technology, to get a bank credit or something like that, is very complicated for them. They ask a lot of requirements, and for that reason, the miner avoid to do all this process, because it's a very bureaucratic process, papers, permissions, forms, and they don't want to spend time and money in all this process. So to, I don't know, put this in easy ways for them could be an option to reduce all these problems that we have already.
Thank you, Alfonso. We have a question for you in French. I will translate. The colleagues from Cameroon, I believe, would like to know how they should go about if they want to use, where to start, use copper plates in the country.
How to start using copper plates? Okay, that's fine. First, one of the biggest challenges now is be sure that the oil supplies in the country are available. I mean, copper as a material. Also, some reagents that we need, some acids and some chemicals that we need to build the copper plate, as we need to create that, and also all the I mean wood or other materials that we need to put the support. That's easy. It's not too much invest in comparison to other technologies, and we can provide all the protocols to you how to do that. So that is available in our website. But one of the biggest issues is to characterize the tailings, because not all the tailings are available to use the copper plates. So you can take some samples and see what is the description, mineralogical description of the tailings, and the concentration of gold, other metals as well, and the mercury. We can, okay, this is what kind of copper plates we need to put in place in order to get more efficiency, is the idea. So good inventory of the sites and the characterization of the tailings is very important.
Thank you so much. I think we are already 3 minutes over time, but there's a question about IGF support. And maybe this is something that I can take briefly. As we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this is the first phase of the project, and we will now proceed with implementation in IGF countries and deep dive countries. So we will hopefully in the next 12 months have some regional in-person trainings in Asia, Africa, and Latin America based on the different best practices that we have garnered so far, not only in the report, but we keep looking for best practices, and also engage international consultants, build collaboration with experts. We have Pure Earth today, for instance. We have our expert Giorgio and Nelly today. We will be building a robust training modules with site visits in countries to be able to kind of show some of the best practices that we have on the ground. So this is IGF member countries should stay tuned. You'll be receiving information from us. As I mentioned, also, we have funding to support 3 more countries with this support depending on the needs of the country. So we will be confirming these countries and sending invitation letter as well. But in general, if you would like to collaborate with us on this topic, if you're an expert working the ground, if you're a member country that would like to know more about the topic and have more assistance, do please let us know. You know how to contact us, IGF Secretariat at igf.org. So I hope I'm responding to your questions, but we will be able to share information with you. For those that will be in Manila next month, early next month, for the Planet Gold ASGM Forum, we will be there. One of the authors of this report, Fitsum, Phil de Gorges, will be there as well. So please be in touch, and you will be receiving more information as well from us. I think there's other questions about how to become a member. So we're really excited that this research and presentation is triggering some interest to become members. So we'll be communicating with you to share information about how to join the IGF. So I would like to, if there's no concluding remarks from our panelists, any concluding remarks?
Clémence,
yes.
Just one, there's one question that has not been answered directly live about the difference of hazard between mercury and cyanidation techniques.
Yes, and I would like to give you the pleasure to answer this question.
No, I think both are really hazardous material that need to be handled with high care. I would say they're dangerous for different reasons, and they differ in nature and severity. On short term, cyanide can be fatal on really short term. So I would say cyanide leakage can kill you in really few minutes, instantly. Mercury takes longer time to bioaccumulate and to show its toxicity. So in terms of long-term impact, mercury is way more dangerous than cyanide. That because cyanide can also be disaggregated naturally more easily than mercury, which cannot be disaggregated. And in terms of bioaccumulation, mercury bioaccumulate, and we say the concentration of mercury raise as you advance the food chain, and the fish that can be eaten by the population, by the community, can be highly contaminated by mercury. Whereas when you have cyanide, it kills immediately the fishes, so it doesn't accumulate along the value chain. So I would say both are dangerous. And but although with care, cyanide, which is a way better option than mercury, and maybe more difficult to handle. And one of the issues with mercury is something that we've discussed, is the easiness to use, easiness to access. So this makes it even more dangerous because it can spread really easily in really remote areas, and this is why we are observing today. And it's echoes what Giorgio said about, by definition, ASGM happen in quite remote area where it's difficult to access, but mercury can access easily, more than cyanide. So it's also add this dimension. I will stop here. Maybe if someone else want to complement, but it was just because we mentioned that we would answer this point.
Yes.
Live.
Thank you so much for a reminder, and I think that it's good to have some cautious words when concluding this webinar, because tailings can be dangerous in terms of contamination depending on what product has been used. But at the same time, we have seen that there's opportunity, there's untapped opportunity for processing for communities. And I know that in the report we talk about cooperative and how some ASGM operators have been able to organize themselves to take the opportunity to reprocess tailings. So thank you so much. I think there's a lot of excitement about this report. We will continue to work on this subject. I have shared the link to the report that you will see on our website. Translations into English and French is underway. You will already see a translation in French, and translation in Spanish will be available next week. So I would like to really thank everyone for remaining after an hour and a half with us. We have more than 30 participants that are still with us. So thank you so much for taking time to tune in. And I would like to thank Nelly and Giorgio, our lead researcher, for this project and report. I know I have tired you over the last 18 months, but we're really grateful for the collaboration, for your expertise and insight recommendation. And to Alfonso, really thank you for your presentation. I'm sure there's a lot of requests to receive your presentation. We'll be in touch to see how we can share your experience with our IGF members and other stakeholders here. And we're looking forward for future collaboration. And I would like to thank my colleague, Grégoire Villois, who is also a co-lead for this project. We continue to work on this, and Vaila, one of our tax experts. So there's a lot of questions, a lot of topics to impact deeply in the future. And we are obviously happy with the continued support of the US, who will help us continue to work on this topic and support our members in the coming 2 years at the very least. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful afternoon, evening, or day.
Thank you to all.
And if I can add, thank you very much, Clémence, for leading this project since its inception. It's been a long work, long journey, sometimes quite difficult, but you managed it really, really well. So I would like to thank you specifically.
Thank you all for supporting me. So have a wonderful day and take care. See you soon.